I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.
Hello horror hounds, welcome to my horror house. Today we're going to be talking about Studio 666 and asking whether it is more Foo Fighters or Poo Fighters. Is it 666 or sucks? The story involves Dave Grohl and his band Foo Fighters struggling to record their 10th album, and they rent a house that has a dark history in it. A band from the 90s rented the house to record their album and everybody died, and Dave finds recordings from those sessions in the basement on sort of reel-to-reel audio tapes, and things after that go a little bit Evil Dead. He gets possessed, people start getting knocked off, members of the band start getting killed, and all the time he becomes more and more obsessed with finishing this track, the track that's on that reel, the track that has to be finished, and once it's finished, some sort of demonic energy is released. I think this film is frustratingly almost great and at times frustratingly bad. It's not something to take seriously. It's definitely something to watch with a few beers or with your stoner friends if you like. Horror comedy is a very, very tricky balance to pull off, and there are many films that have tried and failed to do it. This film airs, I would say, much more towards comedy than horror. There's no tension in the film, there's no suspense whatsoever. What you do get is the occasional pretty graphic, practically effects driven kills. The film starts off with a very quick, pretty damn graphic scene set in the 90s. Then we jump to the present day and, you know, our happy-go-lucky Foos. The effects, however, are a tale of two halves, in my humble opinion. The practical kills, which are augmented by CG blood, done really tastefully actually. CG sort of blood augmentation to push it into, I would say, early Peter Jackson territory and sort of Evil Dead territory, sort of like cartoonish OTT gore, which is a hell of a lot of fun. There's that, and then there's the demonic infestation aspect of it, which is much more heavily CG overlaid with these shadowy demon figures with red eyes that look far more cartoonish and to my mind give the film a kind of Scooby-Doo feeling, which again they could have leaned into and pushed into. It wants to sit on the fence too much. For a film that's got such extreme gore on it, it's going to sound strange to say it plays it safe, but it doesn't go full throttle to be one thing or another. It's a quite funny, amiable time spent with the band and watching them play versions of themselves. I don't know the members of the band particularly well. I'm a massive fan of the Foo Fighters. I know Dave Grohl, Taylor Hawkins, the drummer, and I know Pat Smear from his time in Nirvana and then the Foo Fighters. The other two guys, forgive me, I don't know. So not knowing them means I didn't get the sense that they were necessarily playing exaggerated versions of themselves enough. I wanted them to go more in that direction. I wanted the excessive gore I wanted there to be more of that. It's fairly well paced out throughout the film. There's massive gaps between sections of gore, so it doesn't go massively over the top like early Peter Jackson did. The cartoony looking demons, as I say, with the Scooby-Doo feel, would have been more than happy to watch the Foo Fighters try and solve a Scooby-Doo style 18 certificate R-rated sort of supernatural horror mystery. That would have been a hell of a lot of fun. I would have liked them if they're leaning more towards the comedy than the horror, as this film does, to really go for the comedy. This is no Spinal Tap by any stretch of the imagination. It's a very gentle sort of behind the scenes of a rock band comedy. It's over the top gore is too sporadic for it to be an absolute splatterfest. The laughs are too paced out for it to be an absolute laugh a minute, which is a real shame, because the gore when it comes is great. The laughs when they come, and they do come, are fine. There are some really good jokes in here. They're just spread out too much. And perhaps with the gore being spread out and the laughs being spread out, this is why I feel that the film has a massive issue with pacing. The first half is pretty slow going, but we're hanging out with the band and getting to know them, which was fine. I'd have preferred them to be more extreme characters of themselves. Dave Grohl is famously like the nicest man in rock and roll. It would have been really nice for him to have played an asshole version of himself. As it happens, there is a sort of aftertaste of sort of vanity project to this, an aftertaste of wanting your cake and eating it. Dave gets possessed, so he gets to play the asshole because he's possessed, but he also gets to be the hero of the film because it's not his fault, and when he gets unpossessed, he can then take on sort of the heroic lead role. Choose something. Choose a thing you want to be and go for that. I'd have loved them all to have played awful versions of themselves. The most successful at that, in my opinion, is Pat Smear, and it took a little while, I think, for all of them to bed down and get comfortable with being in front of the cameras and making a movie as opposed to a music video. There's a beautiful little running gag going along all the way through that Pat sleeps in a different set of pajamas each night, all the way down to a Willy Winky cap and nightshirt, and he's just playing a sort of amiable, happy-go-lucky, sort of like innocent fool, and you start becoming really endeared to him. None of the others really had defining traits per se. I read somewhere that the drummer Taylor Hawkins decided not to read the script and learn his lines and just ad-libbed all his lines, which was an absolute mistake, because he ad-libbed gems such as "my blisters have got blisters" and "lo, my sides, they are splitting." I didn't find it consistently funny enough to work as a comedy. I didn't find it consistently gory enough to work as just a splatterfest. The jump scares and the demon stuff just didn't work for me at all. There was no suspense or tension in any of that. And yet, it's an amiably good time. You can find things to like about it. If you're in a bad mood and you watch it, you can probably find a hell of a lot of things to gripe and snipe about it. For something based on the premise that seems to be, hey, why don't the Foo Fighters make a horror movie? There are little moments, there are little gems in there that are pretty good. I was just wanting more. There's an excellent Pearl Jam high five joke, which unfortunately gets repeated, and I was thinking, someone like Adam McKay, who's making the Anchorman movies or the Step Brother movies and the like, who let's shoot the script and then let's shoot loads of different ad-lib scenes and then puts it all together in the editing suites. Something like that would have benefited, I think, Studio 666, although that's putting an awful lot of pressure on a group of 5 musicians who are non-actors to ad-lib at the level of like your Will Ferrell and Paul Rudds. I guess that's just not going to happen, which is why an awful lot of the band's ad-libs and off-the-cuff remarks just seem to be telling each other to fuck off and dropping F-bombs and stuff like that. And some of them are fine, some of them are funny. An awful lot of it sort of falls on stony ground. You're waiting a long time between kills. You're waiting a long time between jokes that land. And it's not helped by the really poorly paced second half of the movie that has multiple endings that just sort of stretch out when the film really could and should have just ended. We get a final supernatural showdown, which unfortunately for dramatic purposes involves the band, or the remaining members of the band, standing in the background of shots watching motionless while things happen. That is not a way to engage your protagonists in the finale of the movie. And then there's another ending after that, and then there's a coda after that. No. This movie's an hour and 45 minutes. 90 minutes, guys. Just tighten absolutely everything up. I'm sure there's probably stuff and takes on the cutting room floor and scenes that can be... There's a way to tighten this up into a pretty damn snappy 90-minute movie that doesn't feel a bit like between stuff happening, which unfortunately is what Studio 666 ultimately becomes. Did I need the Foo Fighters horror movie? No, I absolutely did not. Is there enough in there to recommend it to the curious? Absolutely. If you've got a couple of hours to spare with some beers or some joints, if that's your bag, and if it is, can't help a brother out. I think the movie would go down a lot better that way, a lot better. As it is, yeah, it's amiable fun. I didn't hate it. I don't love it. Will I watch it again? Probably not. I'm not invested in the band enough to want to watch it again, and the story is not strong enough to have me watch it again. But there's fun to be had in there, and there's frustratingly, I think, a surprisingly good movie in there that just needs a tighter script, better editing, maybe more of a supporting cast around the band to help zhuzh things along. I don't know. So I don't usually give a thumbs up or thumbs down rating, so I don't know why I'm doing that. I'm certainly not going to start now. It was all right. Choose something. Choose a thing you want to be and go for that.